All right, I want to bring you guys another deck. This one does feature Slogurk from the latest set. I call it "The Boys Are Back in Town" with both the ooze and the frog horror here frontlining the event. Let's get to the points. So the points in this deck are mostly tied up in 3 for Strip Mine and 3 for Natural Order. You'll see some of the targets later. 2 in Vampiric Tutor, 1 in Crop Rotation, and 1 in Intuition. Mostly for Intuition piles involving certain lands or Life from the Loam. So I won't really get into too many piles. The Crop Rotation as well for your Silver Bullet lands or for Crop Rotation, and Vampiric Tutor typically for Strip Mine. This is where I put the points. I think the most flexible points maybe you have are in the Natural Order. So if you want to change that around for something else, then go for it. But I think Natural Order has a good place in this deck just to be able to find a Primeval Titan. Yeah, let's get on to the parts of the deck. A lot of what we're doing actually relates to this new card from Adventures of the Forgotten Realms, Druid class. The first ability is whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you gain a life. The second level is you may play an additional land on each of your turns. And the third level we don't really use, but it can make a big guy. These first 2 are mostly what our deck is focused on. So we play cards like Fast Bond, where the first level here will help negate that loss of life. Exploration, which is the second level, as well as, what Fast Bond does. You get to play extra lands every turn. We have ways to sacrifice lands so that we can play them from our graveyard with Crucible of Worlds. And then here are just some generic card advantage and mana advantage cards. The Sylvan Library, you can draw extra cards every turn, or at least choose the card you want. The Valakut Exploration, also a pretty new one. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you exile the top card of your library. You can play it as long as it remains exiled. But at your end step, if there are still cards exiled, you haven't played them for whatever reason, you decide not to, you get to deal damage to an opponent equal to the number of cards exiled. So if you play 15 lands with some Zurin Orb Fast Bond Loop, and you've exiled 15 cards under here, you're going to shoot your opponent for 15. The Mox Diamond is mostly just from some extra mana ramp because we have 38 lands in this deck, I believe, maybe 39 with a modal dual face card or something. And of course, one of the main lands we're trying to get back from our graveyard to play every turn, or with extra land drops, is a Strip Mine, so we can just take our opponent off of any mana producing lands that they may have. I wanted to focus a little bit on some of the Planeswalkers in this deck. This is all the Planeswalkers in the deck, and really it looks like a murderer's row. Like, these are some heinous Planeswalkers here. Wrenn and 6 can get you back your Strip Mine every turn. Grist is an ability to mill some cards into your graveyard that you can get back with Life from the Loam, or just sacrifice one of your mana dorks to kill somebody. And then Oko. Elk things, make food to gain some life. Whenever I see these 3 Planeswalkers, like with this color distribution too, it's nasty. It feels bad for my opponent. So we have a lot of creatures here. We have 29 creatures in the deck. From mana elves, mana dorks, I guess. Some of these are birds, right? We have a lot of mana dorks, which let us jump to 3 pretty easily. So we don't really have many 2-drops. We only have these 4, which are, I think, some of the best 2-drops you can get. Maybe a Scavenging Ooze would be another good one, which I'll cover shortly. But mostly we're trying to get to the 3s ahead of curve, and then the 5s and 6s. We have no 4-drops. I do want to talk a little bit about the boys, because these these two legendaries do embody a lot of what the deck is trying to do here. So let's just start with Slogurk, the Overslime. Trample. Really relevant ability here, because whenever a land is put into your graveyard from anywhere, put a 1/1 counter on Slogurk, the Overslime. So just like if we had the Valakut Exploration, if I'm doing some loop with the Strip Mine, I need some way to end the game. Slogurk is a great way to do that, because you're looping the land, it's going into your graveyard, it's coming out, it's going in, it's going to get the 1/1 counter each time. So he's going to grow. Second ability, or maybe the third ability, I guess, you can remove 3 counters to return it to your hand. Now, this might not come up too often, but you certainly can use it if you want to, be able to play him again and use this fourth ability here several times, because you can make a lot of mana in this deck with something like the Lotus Cobra. Whenever lands come into play, you make a mana. The last ability is really nice because it leaves the battlefield trigger. So if it dies, it gets exiled. If you remove 3 counters, whenever it leaves the battlefield, you can return up to 3 target land cards from your graveyard to your hand, which can let you, then play them from your hand if you don't have the Crucible of Worlds or something like that, but you do have a fast bond. So Slogurk, really good in this deck and this style of deck where you're trying to get a lot of land drops in. The second guy, or second boy in this deck, is the Gitrog monster. Some of you might be very familiar with this guy if you play some CEDH. I don't. But he does have Death Touch as a 6/6, so he's going to stop basically everything. He has a trigger at the beginning of your upkeep: sacrifice the Gitrog monster unless you sacrifice a land. Sacrificing a land will trigger this first ability of Slogurk. As well, whenever a land... I've skipped an ability here, but whenever one or more land cards are put into your graveyard from anywhere, draw a card. So if you're doing that loop and you have Gitrog monster in play, you're drawing cards every time, which will hopefully find you a different way to end the game. You may also play an additional land on each of your turns, so he has an exploration effect tacked onto him. So these two guys really embody, what we're trying to do with the deck. They work really well with the deck. And now, let's just kind of go over some of the creatures. One of the nice parts of this deck I find is we do play Eldritch Evolution, which helps us drop from 1 to 3 and 3 to 5. So keep that in mind with your creatures. That's why I don't really play some of the 2s or 4s, just because I don't think they'll provide enough. So I played the Elvish Reclaimer. This is a way to tutor some lands. And then everything else in here is a mana dork of some kind. A lot of the times, like I said, our Planeswalkers are 3, Eldritch Evolution is 3. We have a lot of 3-drop creatures that we just want early to jump ahead of the curve. And that's what all those elves help us do. So in the 3 drops, we have Slogurk, like we said. Whenever a land enters the battlefield, you gain a life. Some kind of card advantage as well. Play an additional land, fixes all your mana, returns something. This you can use in your intuition loops. Play land cards from graveyards, destroy something. Both of these tireless guys, they make clues or treasures, which can help you get out of loops because you can draw cards. Klothys, this is your graveyard control. Also, just a really good way to something you could Green Sun Zenith into. Uro, Titan of Nature's Wrath. This is an extra land drop each turn. You're drawing a card, gaining some life, and Leovold to kind of protect some of your stuff. In the 5 drops, we have the Gitrog and Titania. I'll go over Titania quickly. When she enters the battlefield, you can return a land card from your graveyard. And then whenever a land is put into your graveyard, you can make a 5/3 elemental. So this is another easy way with loops to just make a huge army of guys. And then, of course, the Primeval Titan, one of probably your main targets you want a natural order into, just because it finds 2 lands, then it attacks. If you're playing this guy early, 2 turns ahead of the curve or something, even on turn 3, this guy can take over the game, and often he does. So those are the creatures in the deck. Now I want to talk about kind of some of the ways we can abuse these creatures. Just starting with a little bit of some value. You can play an extra land or put a land into play, draw a card. Just some good ways to get ahead. We have a little bit of removal in this deck. Abrupt Decay being very, very general. Punishing Fire being recurable. Eliminate being able to kill Planeswalkers. Same with the Blood Chief's Thirst. We do play Grove of the Burn Willows, so that's our way to get this back, to constantly be shooting things down. And then just some utility cards here in Unearth can return a lot of our creatures, or the Raven's Crime, where we can retrace with lands we return with Life from the Loam or Slogurk, something like that, to keep our opponent hellbent. So these are some of the more utility cards we have, some removal. Now I want to get to more of the heavy hitters in the instants and sorceries category. Life from the Loam. So I've talked a little bit about this card already. What it does is returns 3 land cards from your graveyard to your hand, and you can dredge it. So if you have an intuition pile and it includes Life from the Loam and 2 lands, you're guaranteed to get those lands. Often you want the Life from the Loam in the graveyard, so you can dredge it, put 3 cards from the top of your library into your graveyard, and then you can return the other 2 lands that they didn't give you, or whatever the case is. So Life from the Loam, really powerful card in this deck, and something that you're totally fine being in the graveyard. If they counter it, no problem. You'll just dredge it back next turn. About the only counter that really works effectively against this is Force of Negation. So watch out for that, because Force of Negation does exile. Other cards that you could put in your intuition pile, the Ballad Gate Recovery, or play it as land, and Regrowth, just to return anything. Now, here are some of the tutors in the deck, the creature tutors. Green Sun Zenith. You can search for a green creature card with converted mana cost X or less. Now, of the 29 creatures, all 29 are green. So it's going to let you get anything. And there is a hidden 30th creature in Grist the Hunger Tide. So if you do X is 3, you can find a Planeswalker, Grist the Hunger Tide, put him into the battlefield, start using him right away as a removal spell, or milling cards and making insects. You can also find your Klothys to be able to control the graveyard, or your Slogurk. Of course, if you get it X is 6, you can get your Primeval Titan or whatever you need. But this card, really effective, lets you tutor your deck for almost anything you need. Finale of Devastation, the exact same as Green Sun Zenith, except it finds any creature. It doesn't matter. We're only green creatures anyways. But it also lets you search your graveyard. So if they've killed something and you want to recur it, the Finale of Devastation is a good way to do that. And then Eldritch Evolution, as I've mentioned, lets you jump ahead with your Mana Elves. Then you can sack that Mana Elf to find some 3-drop. This can also find a Grist the Hunger Tide. It can also find a Klothys if you're against some control deck and you're like, oh man, it got too much removal. Well, Klothys is really hard to remove. So think of how you're using your Eldritch Evolution and use it wisely. Now, these are some of the very specific tutors in the deck. Sylvan Scrying will find any land, put it into your hand, so you can find your Strip Mine. You have Entomb, which can put any card into your graveyard, which, if you have something like the Regrowth, is any card really. But often what you want to do is put your Life from the Loam in. If you already have a way to play cards from graveyard, put your Strip Mine in, things like that. Gamble is often called the second Entomb, and really it's because, well, you don't care what you get generally, or what you're discarding if you get it. So if you're tutoring for your Life from the Loam, okay, it's already in your hand. Otherwise, oh, I accidentally discarded it, well, I'll just dredge it next turn, no problem. Really powerful card. And then Unmarked Grave, a new one from Modern Horizons 2, allows you to search for a non-legendary card, put it into your graveyard, then shuffle. So this won't let you find some of your legendary lands like Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth, but it will let you find your Strip Mine, important things like that, or your life from the loam, whatever it is. So really powerful tutors to the graveyard, sometimes to your hand. That's really what we want to do with this deck to keep it really consistent. So those are some of the powerful cards, and I think that's everything. Oh yes, of course, let's talk about some of the utility lands that we have. So our main utility land, of course, as we've already mentioned, is the 3-point strip mine. We also have 0-point strip mine. Of course, it only destroys non-basics. That's why it's 0 points, but still really effective against a lot of decks. I have a Tranquil Thicket. If you are playing with Life from the Loam, this is an easy way to draw extra cards because you can keep cycling it. As well, if somebody's trying to exile your Life from the Loam, keep in mind you can use a cycle ability in response to be able to dredge that Life from the Loam back to your hand. We also play some cards like Nurturing Peatland, which when they're in play, you can sacrifice it to draw a card, then play it again from your graveyard. The Grove of the Burnwills, which I mentioned, is a way, it does fix your mana, it gives your opponent some life, but the life gain is the important part, so you can return your Punishing Fire to your hand. Glacial Chasm, if you're really getting beat down, you can crop rotation for this, no problem. And then each turn, if you got extra land drops, you'll be staying ahead or staying even with your land drops, because when it comes into play, you do have to sacrifice a land. But while it's in play, you can attack. Well, that's no problem. You can sacrifice it probably to a Azuran Orb if you need to. But the most important part, all damage dealt to you is reduced to 0. So Lightning Bolts do nothing. Goblin Guides do nothing. Really, really effective card. Field of the Dead. We play 38 lands in this deck, 39 including the Valaged Recovery. So Field of the Dead, an easy way to make a bunch of zombies when we have infinite land drops. And now here's two more specific ones. Oboro, Palace in the Clouds. You can return Oboro to your hand by tapping it. So you can tap it, use the second ability to return to your hand, play it again. So this can let you, it makes sure you always have a land drop if you have landfall creatures or effects. And if you do have a fast bond type effect in play, you can keep doing that multiple times a turn by tapping it, returning it, tapping it, returning it, playing it. So this is a way to get infinite land drops without having to use your graveyard. The last utility land that I really have is the Cephalid Colosseum. Now, this is somewhat a strange one in the deck. It adds a blue and deals 1 damage to you. At Threshold, you can sacrifice it to make target player draw 3 cards and then discard 3 cards from their hand. So if you want to use it on yourself, you're targeting yourself, you can use it to return a Life from the Loam to your hand, dredge some cards, draw 2 extra, and then discard 3, play Life from the Loam, you'll have like 5 cards in your hand at that point. Now you can only use it when you have Threshold. Keep that in mind. The other reason I put this card in the deck is it's a good answer to Thassa's Oracle. You can crop rotation in response to the Oracle trigger. They've emptied their library with a Tainted Pact or whatever card they're using. Then you could target them, force them to draw cards, and they'll lose the game. So maybe a meta call. Maybe you could replace this with a Bojuka Bog or something, depending on what you're seeing most often. But for me, I've decided to go with the Cephalid Colosseum. So we do play a lot of other lands, fetch lands, everything like that. They'll all be in the list that I'll post. And thanks a lot, guys. I'm now, I think, at 11 subscribers, so it's been pretty good. Thanks for watching my videos, and yeah, if you think this is a deck you want to try out, then you have my endorsement. It's a really fun deck, and unfortunately, it does make your opponents a little miserable, so don't play it all the time, but enjoy. Thanks. Hey guys, thanks for watching the video. If you have any ideas you want for deck techs or something you want me to cover, let me know. I'm hoping to keep doing this for a while, at least until I run out of ideas, so thanks again. Have a good one.